How's it going? Awesome Mayo here, and today we're going to do something a little different. I get a lot of questions. By the time we're done here, we are going to answer so many questions that I get right here in this short class. So if this was sent to you by me or somebody else, there's a very good reason for that. But I want to say before we start that most people that get started in real estate or they want to get a business going, what a lot of those people don't understand is that one of the rarest skills in the world is being able to do it, being able to start a business and have it successfully running and be able to do that from zero. It's a skill and almost nobody in the world knows how to do it. And that's really what we focus on. That's the skill that we teach. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be doing great financially or not so great, but you need to be able to have the skill and to learn the skill to be able to do it from zero. I guess we could think of it like this. Everybody wants to be rich, but very, very few people or much fewer people want to get rich. One is something that happens to you. The other is something that you go out and get. You go out and create. And the big problem in the world, the biggest problem in the world really is lack of education. Opportunity, you could say that, but opportunity is a function of education. You have to have the education to realize it. So it really does come down to education, and not just any education, but the right education. And that, more than any other reason, is why I and my friends and everyone on our team, it's why we are doing this and why we're doing what we do. Now, that being said, even with all that said, some of my students do fail. It's, even though we have, I've mentioned this going over and over again, I brag all the time, but it's about other people, what other people are doing, and we have the highest definition of success that's publicly stated and the highest success rate of students anywhere. But even with that said, there is a failure rate. Some students who go through and get the education and get trained, some people fail. So the question is why? And that's what today is all about. This is why I'm going to cover this is one of the biggest secrets, one of the biggest reasons that people fail, even some of my students. So that's what we're going to cover here. Most people never get where they want to be, so I hope that this really helps you. And as always, I love hearing from you and hearing how it does help you. So please let me know what you think. And let's get started. This is why my peoples fail. Why some of my students fail. Let's get started. Awesome Mayo here with today's WBE lesson. Police pain with forced accountability. You must learn to police pain. Nothing in this world stays the same. Everything is either getting worse or getting better. You are either getting worse or getting better. Most people would be grateful to have your biggest problem. You should be too. Treat pain as an investment. It's up to you to seek out and invite pain and the growth that comes with it. If you allow yourself to deteriorate, if you accept a compromised level of ambition, if you start the journey of settling, then every day becomes a descending staircase. You gradually become a worse and worse version of yourself. Momentum works both ways. The longer you stay below your potential, the more layers of comfort develop. They grow thicker and thicker. When you feed them a diet of mediocrity, the roots of indifference grow deeper and stronger. Most people live galaxies below their potential, pushing their limits only during micro moments that are separated by decades at best. It doesn't have to be that way for you. What happens to create those moments of drive, and what if you could do that on purpose? What if you could turn a switch and instantly experience what it's like to be a better version of yourself? We all know that there's an ocean of untapped potential within each of us, but almost nobody ever taps into it. Your life completely changes each time that you explore a deeper recess of possibility, but you must do it with regularity. It's how you normalize that behavior. Today's lesson is a recipe for doing just that, to reaching out to lost dreams that you secretly gave up on and going far beyond, and making that place, that plane of enhanced capability, your new home. This is how you become an increasingly superior version of yourself. If that sounds crazy, let me simplify it. No cliffhangers or leading promises or delaying the big reveal. You want the secret? Here it is. What is forced accountability? What is today's lesson? Here it is in 2 words. Controlling pain. That's it. That's what today's lesson is all about. Controlling pain. Pain is unavoidable. Instead of trying to avoid pain, learn to police pain. Sometimes when I'm talking to a class or a group of people, I'll ask them if they had their life to live over again, do they think they could get further in their life than they are right now? And of course, everybody says yes. Then I ask how much further, and that's when people start chuckling and reminiscing, because in their minds, they know that they could have gotten a lot further. But what if you only had the last 10 years of your life to live over, or just the last 5 years, or just the last 1 year? Could you get much further? And the answer is still yes, right? How about just the last 6 months, or even the last month, or even if you just relived the last week? Could you get much further than you did? If you exhausted every resource and you went psychotic on finding and exploiting every opportunity in the last week, if a better version of you just lived the last week over, then you could get a lot further than you did, right? Of course you could. We all could. So here's the question. Why? There's really only two reasons that we're so sure that we could do so much more. We all know that we could get much further. There's basically two reasons for that: education and motivation. Now, I talk about education all the time and it's vital, but between the two, education, motivation, which is more important? It's obvious, right? Motivation wins every time, because without it, you wouldn't do anything. And it's interesting to me how many people are downplaying the importance of motivation nowadays. People get all tough guy about it. I don't need motivation. I just need to learn how to make money. And it's become this accepted practice to minimize the significance of motivation. But in reality, motivation is about the only thing in this world that will fix every other thing. If you relive the last week of your life, think of it this way: if you relived the last week of your life and you were 10 times smarter, it would do you no good unless you were motivated to do something about it. Intelligence is only as good as its appliance. So education alone, no matter the amount, would not be enough. But motivation, on the other hand, if you relived your life or just the last year or just the last week with 10 times the motivation, what would that do? Not only would that be enough, but it would be required. It would be a required ingredient, actually the only required ingredient. On the road to a better you, motivation is a necessary toll booth, and the only single variable that by itself would be enough. Sun Tzu said that the ultimate resource is resourcefulness. Actually, as you know, I said it first, then he stole it from me. But the problem that most people have is that they focus on the lack of resource. They focus on, oh, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have the right contacts, or I don't have enough savings, or enough, I don't have the right credit. But if you're resourceful enough, you can get any of those resources, but you need to be motivated to be resourceful. So like I said earlier, motivation is about the only thing in the world that can fix every other thing in the world. So to harness the power of motivation, to really bring that life-changing power and to command it at will, all you have to do is understand the two primary motivators for all living creatures on the planet: pain and pleasure. Now, we won't talk too much about pleasure for several reasons. One is that it's too easy to do without, so instead let's focus on pain. That's the big secret: pain. The answer to the question earlier is real simple. What makes people do things that are ordinarily considered painful or inexplicable or even impossible for them to do? One word: accountability. And for our chat today, the word accountability just means pain. To control pain, just like controlling anything else, you need to understand it. There's basically three categories of pain: emotional, physical, and financial. We've talked about that before, but the better you get at controlling pain, the more your life will change. A good friend of ours told me a story of a farmer's dog that's sitting on a nail. The dog's sitting on a nail. The dog's hollering and moaning, and somebody walks up to the farmer and says, "Why don't you help the dog off the nail?" And the farmer says, "When it hurts enough, he'll move." Most people are that dog, hollering and moaning, because ultimately it's easier for them. It's less painful to sit on that nail than it is to move. No matter how much it hurts, it's less painful for most people to stay where they are than it is to move. And that's the problem we need to solve. The pain of your location must eclipse the pain of getting to your destination. It must be more painful to be where you are than it is to get where you want to be. Remember one of our sayings, one of our sound bites, I've used this many times in interviews: if you don't get where you want to be, you're going to belong where you are. And one sentence, that's what forced accountability does. It makes advancing towards your goal less painful than not. Immobility must be more painful than mobility. The pain of inaction must overshadow its comfort. When you harness the power of pain, the power of accountability, you can unlock an unimaginable force of capability. Here's a story time example. In the early 1500s, a Spanish conquistador, not me, another one, named Hernan Cortez, had his eye on Mexico. He played the political game in Cuba for years, and eventually he had the clout in the Spanish Empire where he could lead an army to Mexico, or at least he thought he did. At the last moment, he wasn't authorized and his charter was revoked, but he used some trickery and he snuck off from Mexico anyway, and he took an army of about 500 men with him. Now, after getting to Mexico with his men, he realized that he made more than a few miscalculations. His men were facing the Aztec army. Now, the Aztecs were known for being bloodthirsty savages who showed no mercy. They tortured, they killed, they wore the skin of their enemies as clothing. They were a bunch of nuts, pretty much like Texas today. Just kidding, we love Texas, just kidding. Also, by the way, the Aztecs outnumbered Cortez's men. Cortez had about 500 men, the Aztecs were about 500,000. 500 men to 500,000. So Cortez's men were pissed. He was losing authority and respect with his men, and he was losing it fast. One night, a loyal soldier came to him and told Cortez that a mutiny was being planned. The men, holy moly, were going to kill Cortez, and they were going to take the ships back to Cuba. Now, put yourself in Cortez's shoes for a second. What would you do? Because Cortez is in an interesting situation, right? Even if he talked the men into sparing his life, if he went back to Cuba with them, he would be killed for his insubordination and his failure in Mexico, because not only did he disobey orders to go to Mexico, but then he returned home as a failure. But on the other hand, if he convinced the men to let him live and they left him behind, he'd be alone and he would certainly be killed by the locals. So what should he do? What would you do? Interesting situation, right? Well, here's what Cortez did. First, he realized the real problem. The problem wasn't the way that his soldiers saw the Aztecs. It wasn't the way that his soldiers saw him. It wasn't even the way that his soldiers saw themselves. The real problem was the way that the soldiers saw their options. So to eliminate the perceived options, Cortez secretly ordered that his ships be sunk so there would be no way back home. But his men eventually found out about the plan, but by the time they caught on, it was too late. There was only one ship left. Then Cortez stood in front of his men and he said, look, there's only one ship left. There's not room for all of you, so if anybody takes that ship home, you are leaving the rest of us here to die. And once you get back, you will be executed for deserting us. Now, if we stay here and we do nothing, we're certainly going to be killed. The only option we have is to advance forward while we're healthy and not hungry, and we can take the fight to the Aztecs on our terms. And yes, you can kill me now, but that'll leave you with one less person to attack with, and you'll have to deal with those among you that are loyal to me, so you'll be fighting among yourselves on top of having to deal with the Aztecs. So you can attack with me and have a chance of changing the world, or you can go back home and be executed for being a coward. What do you want to do? None of the men chose to leave, and that's how Cortez and his men beat the Aztecs and conquered Mexico. That's the power of forced accountability. Don't avoid pain, become a master of policing pain. By policing pain, you not only control your options, but your capability as well. Most people have never heard of a company called Next, N-E-X-T. It was a tech company and it was a complete failure, but the owner was a genius. He really was a genius. And just a few years before that company, before he started Next, he started another similar company in the exact same industry, and he made a fortune. And he started this first company, the company before Next, from zero. When he started Next, he was rich. And he said that was the problem. He said that the reason he failed was because the hunger wasn't there. The money was a cushion, and the comfort that came with it meant that he had options, and he did not have to make every little thing work. His back wasn't against the wall, and so he failed, and he was called a moron for failing. His name was Steve Jobs, proving that even brilliance needs accountability. He eventually went back to that first company that he started before Next. That company's called Apple, and he went back to that company when they were about to go belly up. And then, with his back against the wall, they were like, 90 days from closing doors? He turned everything around, again, with his back against the wall, with no options. He saved Apple and changed the world. That's forced accountability. That's the power we're talking about. Limiting your options so the hardest thing to do suddenly becomes the easiest thing to do. Realizing that comfort is the enemy. That's forced accountability. Understanding that comfort is the enemy. Limiting your options so that the hardest thing to do suddenly becomes the easiest thing to do. Even if for no other reason, then it's the only thing left to do. When I work with students, one of the first things that I ever tell them is that they have to have some major pain in their life. If you have a job that you hate, for example, the real question is, how much do you hate your job? The pain of your job has to be more than the pain of creating another source of income through a business or something else, anything else. However you plan on creating that income, it's going to be work, it's going to be effort. All progress comes from pain. So the pain of your job has to be more than the pain of moving forward with something else. If that's not the case, and for the average person it almost never is, if the pain of your job is less than the pain of building your business, then you'll be just like that dog on the nail, complaining about your job, but staying there because at the end of the day, it's less painful to be at the job than it is to replace your income. This is one of the reasons that I qualify students so much, because people who are sitting on nails and refusing to move can be a real pain in the ass. They can be a real nightmare to deal with. Years ago I had a student who was trying to put one of our business models in place, and he told me that it was really hard for him to do. So I asked him, it's hard compared to what? And that's the real question, because if you say something is easy or hard, you have to be, those are relative terms, you have to be comparing it to something else. So I asked him, what was he comparing it to? What other ways does he know to start from zero and start making 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month and more? What were his other options? Because for most people, they don't have a whole bunch of options of things that they can do that'll give them that reward. So for this student, I asked him what his options were, and he said he didn't have any other options, any other means of achieving those financial results. So then I said, okay, so this is actually the easiest way that you know of to make that kind of money. And he kind of laughed, and then I asked again, I said, okay, well, really, what you said this was hard compared to what? And I wasn't trying to jump all over him, I was just trying to make a point. And eventually he did come around, he's done amazing things since then, and he's thankful for this conversation we had. But my point that I was making to him, and I want to convey to you, is that what he wasn't saying and what he really meant was that it was hard compared to doing nothing. And if you don't want to do anything, then it's going to be hard to do anything. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I qualify students so much. You must understand that the pain of moving forward has to be less than the pain of staying where you are, or even the pain of moving backward. Otherwise, you will be comparing doing something to doing nothing, and everything will seem hard or seem like hard work. It's all about pain. I've seen students who hate their job, but then they try to get into some business and they realize that it's work, and all of a sudden they start finding reasons why being at their job isn't that bad. At least I have insurance and I have a steady paycheck and I get to wear these pretty uniforms. It gets crazy because they just start finding reasons why it's not that bad. It's all about pain. And these students, the people that do that, the people that start getting more comfortable where they are, they gradually become less committed to progress and more comfortable with monotony. Don't get comfortable with monotony. Don't allow that to happen. This is how your years go by without you noticing the less you do, the faster time goes by. Time flies when you do nothing because you have nothing to show for it. Each day is as unremarkable as the one after it and the one before it. It's why you must be committed to moving forward. You know, I always use real life stories, but I want to tell you about a scene in a movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, and really because of the scene I'm going to tell you about. It's a movie called Gattaca. It's from way back in like 1997. A lot of people haven't heard of it or don't remember it, which is too bad because it's an underappreciated story. And it's where Ethan Hawke met his future wife, Uma Thurman. This was before they divorced because after he cheated on her with the babysitter or something. I don't know, allegedly. I don't know. Who knows the real story? It's Hollywood for you. But look at Ethan Hawke here on the cover of the movie. He's so good looking, right? Looks so sharp. I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. But this movie is really, I'm trying to try not ruin the entire movie for you if you haven't seen it. But there's a scene in this movie that really touched me. It really moved me, and it's helped a lot of students. And I remembered it all this time, and I want to share it with you right now in the hopes that it touches you in even a fraction of the way that it's helped me. But this is something really, really powerful. This was something, I'm going to set up this scene for you. I still remember the first time I saw it. So Gattaca is about this genetically modified group of people who are superior to everybody else. They're better looking, they're smarter, they're more athletic, they're richer, they live in different cities. They're basically like genetically and scientifically built to be better than the rest of us. Now, Ethan Hawke fakes his way into this elite class, into this elite group. He's not just average, but he's way below average. And his heart and his body should have given up a long time ago. But somehow, just through determination and strong-mindedness, he's tricked everybody into thinking that he's, not just in the elite class, but he's the leader of all these elite people. But it's not true. How he's been able to compete and train with them physically and mentally with all these people, and he's actually winning, not just competing with them, but he's winning. He's beating them. He's the leader of this class of elite people, of scientifically engineered elite people. He's beating them, but he's not doing it through genetics. It's not genetics. It's through this unbelievable amount of hard work, but he has to hide the hard work that he's doing to make it seem like it's just his genes. It's really cool how they set this whole thing up. And when he was a little kid, he had a brother, and they used to play this game where they go out swimming, and they leave the shore and they'd start swimming to see how far out they could go, and they would keep going until somebody quit. Now, Ethan Hawke's character always lost because he's genetically inferior, and his brother's, genetically superior to Ethan Hawke in every way. And Ethan Hawke's name, by the way, in the movie is Vincent. So Ethan Hawke's brother is genetically superior. Basically, think of Ethan Hawke, he's like the redheaded stepchild of everything. Of all the genetic junk that was left over, that's Ethan Hawke. So there's no way that he should be able to do all the stuff that he's doing. So anyway, when he was little, he used to play with his brother. They'd go swimming. Ethan Hawke lost every time. But then one time, something happened. His brother passed out, and Ethan Hawke had to save him. That's important to remember. Okay, so his brother's superior to him, and the whole family thought that Ethan Hawke died, but really, he snuck off. He changed the way he looks, and he snuck into this city Gattaca, and he's acting like he's this elite person. That's the story, right? So at the end of the movie, when the brother finds out what really happened to Ethan Hawke, that his brother's an imposter and he's pretending to be an elite, he finds him at the end of the movie, and he tells Ethan Hawke that you're in big trouble, you need to quit, and if these people find out what you're doing and who you really are, they might kill you. And Ethan Hawke says, I don't need your help. Remember that one time I beat you when we were swimming? And the brother freaks out. He says, no, we want to go right now. Let's go do the swimming challenge right now. He wants to play the game right then and there at night. Right then and there. So the next scene, Ethan Hawke and his brother are there in the middle of the night at that ocean they used to swim in when they were kids. They're standing on the shore. They're standing there next to each other. They start taking their suits off. And the finished movie is actually a little different than the original screenplay. So some of the stuff that I'm going to tell you right now, some of it was taken out of the movie. I'm going by the screenplay and some of the original versions. It's pretty cool. So this is the big scene. It's nighttime. The waves are going crazy. Right before they go out, the brother says, wait a second. He's talking to Vincent, talking to Ethan Hawke. He says, wait a second, Vincent. This is crazy. If you go out there, you could die. Because he knows how genetically, feeble Vincent is, how, Ethan Hawke is Vincent, right? So he knows how genetically feeble he is. He says, listen, Vincent, you could die out there. And Vincent looks at him and says, I could die right here. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool part. So they go out and they start swimming in total darkness. And after a while, the waves are getting crazy. So after a little bit, the brother stops and he says, Vincent, look, this is crazy. We should stop. Vincent looks at him and says, okay, so you give up, you quit? And the brother doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't want to say that he lost. So he's like, no. And they keep going a little bit further. A while later, the brother stops again. He says, okay, Vincent, let's stop. You proved your point. Vincent says, okay, so you quit? And the brother looks at him and he just doesn't want to admit. He doesn't want to tell Ethan Hawke that he won, right? And his brother's exhausted and he just doesn't believe. He's looking at his genetically flawed brother and he doesn't believe that his brother's beating him. And so he says, how are you doing this? How have you done any of this? And Vincent just looks at him, he repeats himself and he says, do you want to quit? Yes or no? The brother he's not going to bring himself to say he quits. So he says no, and they keep going. They keep going a little bit further, a little bit further. They keep going further and further and further. The waves and current are going nuts. It just ends up being too much. The brother stops Vincent again. He says, okay, fine, I give up. You win, but I can't even see the shore. We have to stop and turn around. I don't even think I can make it back. Ethan Hawke looks at him and he says, we're not going back. It's easier to keep going to the other side. The brother says, what other side? I've never seen another side. And then Vincent says something that I want you to remember. He says, that's because you've always looked back at the shore. Isn't that cool? I've loved that. And then Vincent gets closer to his brother and he says the line. He says it's because you've always looked back at the shore. But then he says the line. The whole reason that I'm telling you all this, the whole point of bringing up the movie, the whole point of talking about Gattaca and everything, Ethan Hawke scoots up to his brother, this genetically inferior guy who's doing all this amazing stuff, beating his brother in the dark with the waves crashing on him, and he's snuck into this city and he's fooled everyone into thinking he's an elite person, but he's really not. What he is doing is like scientifically and medically impossible. He scoots up to his brother and he says, with all this craziness, you got to picture this scene, right? It's nuts. It's dark. The waves are going nuts. His brother is exhausted and doesn't know how he's going to make it back. So Ethan Hawke just beat his brother. He scoots up to him and he says, you want to know how I did all this? This is how I did it. I never saved anything for the swim back. And that's it. Never saving anything for the swim back. I've loved that line since I heard it. Just that scene. I love it. I love it. I love it. I never saved anything for the swim back. This is how I did it. I never saved anything for the swim back. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And in one sentence, like I said, in that sentence, we've used that as a mantra for years, never saving anything for the swim back. You know, it's a little bit more challenging for me to do it here. I hope that I've conveyed the scene and the importance of it to you, even in a small micro way, just that idea of never saving anything for the swim back. And in one sentence, that's a mistake that I see so many people making. They're saving stuff for the swim back. And I'll tell you, when you add this sense of no swimming back on top of this, this element of accountability, you become a different person. Think about the last time you saw somebody who was saving nothing for the swim back. It's obvious, right? You become a totally different person. Every movement, every mini movement within a movement is animated differently, noticeably different. This is not something that is faked. If stopping is an option, an inch of allowable retreat creates a mile of resistance. You should instead irreversibly commit yourself to an avenue of pursuit. We all sense tenacity. When you are truly unstoppable, people won't even try. When you are totally invested into an activity, your every motion is seasoned with the magic. Hidden opportunities reveal themselves and become obvious to you while invisible to others. When you take a course of action, it's not a choice, but a necessity. You wear a cloak of bulletproof willpower. Each decision is decorated with purpose and a refusal to turn back. Obstacles disappear, critics vanish. Each action that you take starts an unseen domino effect of fortune. Weak dedication means that you reach for opportunity with a flaccid grip, but when you grab each opportunity with fearlessness and without second guessing, you realize how many more opportunities there are, how lucrative each one can be, and how much easier the next one is to grab than the last. But this experience, this vision, only comes from the perspective of total dedication. Only with that outlook will you see everything that you would have missed without it. Only when you're like this, and not an ounce less, only when you're in this mode will you experience the sensation and the rewards that come with it. When failure is sincerely not an option, your results will be congruent with your actions. Here's some more examples. We've done a lot of stuff like this, and I'm not saying you should do anything like this. Some of these are famous examples, some of these examples from students, people on our team, and again, I'm not recommending you do any of this. Talk to a lawyer, an attorney, or an immigration specialist. I mean, who knows the kind of trouble you can get into. I'm not suggesting that anyone do any of this. I'm just giving you examples of stuff that other people have done, how other people have moved themselves to get crazy and do things that they once thought were unimaginable. I've talked about Paige Mars before. Her and her husband were separated, but she was still deeply in love with him. Every night she worked on a very long letter that she was writing him, and every few days she would give portions of that letter to a friend, and she told her friend that she wasn't allowed to send that letter to her husband, to her ex-husband, or they were separated, they weren't divorced. She wasn't allowed to send that letter. The friend wasn't allowed to send the letter until Paige showed her friend a bank account balance with a receipt of $100,000. It was only after making $100,000 would she be allowed to get in touch with her husband and tell him how she felt. She had to show her friend that proof. It was out of her hands because she didn't have the letter to send. A couple of months later, she pulled it off. She made an extra $100,000. It was the first $100,000 that she'd ever made, and she had this 50-some page letter that she sent out to her husband, and happy ending, they were reunited. And by the way, the husband did not know about the $100,000, so it's not like he came crawling back after he knew that she had money. At least I don't think it is. Let's assume that it wasn't. Let's hope not. Let's hope that it's true love and that everything works out. But that's an element of forced accountability accountability. It doesn't have to be about money. Arnold Schwarzenegger used to be embarrassed of his skinny legs, so he purposely wore these really short shorts that would force him to work on his legs because people saw his legs, he was uncomfortable, he was embarrassed, and it forced him to fix the problem. By purposely embarrassing himself, he added that level of accountability. You see what I'm saying? When I blimped up to almost 300 pounds, these nutsos took some unflattering pictures of my double chin and sent them to some of our clients and friends. I lost 15 pounds almost overnight. Embarrassment, just like any other pain, is a good motivator. And you can do this on your own pretty easily. Don't shower unless you work out. Be a vegetarian on days that you don't make your calls. Don't drink coffee unless you take the stairs. Don't eat a meal until you make someone smile. Forced accountability can be self-imposed at any time, and those are examples of things that we use in our training. Feel free to borrow them for yourself, but the forced accountability is much more effective when you do these three things. Number one, have a quantified result with the deadline. So 10 pounds in a week, or $10,000 in 2 weeks, for example. And although I'm using 10,000, 100 grand, it could be 100 million. Just adjust it for yourself, but have a quantified result with a quantified deadline. Number two, add a greater pain. This pain needs to be more than the pain of performing or moving towards the desired result. And third, put the control in somebody else's hands. Strangers usually work better, and usually the more people, the better. The more strangers, the better. So when you have a group of people counting on you, relying on you, depending on you, with the defined result and a deadline, a defined deadline, something like a yes or no, either you do it or you don't. There's no room for explanations or excuses or rationalizing. You either deliver or you don't. This works really well because you're sitting under a sword. The only way out is through. And it's actually much easier to do than you might think. In America, really any Western country, things have become so unbelievably easy that we don't even know what difficult means anymore. And so many people are so eager to complain. And remember, we only complain about things that we can change. Nobody complains about gravity, for example, except, women in their 40s, but that's a totally different reason. But even in cases like that, I'm not joking. Women do talk about gravity, but even in those cases, there's a lot of things they can do themselves, to make themselves healthier and look healthier. Not the point. No, that's not really the point right now. But even if you accept that, even if you accept that most people are always looking for the easiest thing to do, even under that premise, there's a real simple solution. Because, forced accountability, when properly used, makes it easier to advance than quit. And that's the solution. If you want to do the easier thing, if you accept that you or the people around you will always do the easier thing, then make it easier to advance than it is to not advance. Write a check for $50,000 to a neo-Nazi party or an abortion clinic or a gay rights group or whatever, whatever you're not into, and you can only stop payment on that check if you double your company in the next 30 days. Take your entire life savings and donate it. Force yourself to make it back. Or pledge it to a charity and watch how they'll brag about how much money you're going to give them. They'll tell everyone, now you've got, dying kids, sick and dying kids waiting on your money. What are you going to do? Turn around and say, no, you've got to make it. Your bank account's going to be empty in 30 days. You've got to make it back. Force yourself to make it back. If you're unhappy with your job, but you're not sure how else you'll make ends meet, put your 2 weeks notice in today, or better yet, leave now. Hypothetically, I'm not recommending you do this. These are all things other people have done. So when I say this, these aren't suggestions to you. I'm just telling you what other people have done. You can go find a fancy car or house, put $10,000 down or $100,000 down or $1 million down in a non-refundable deposit, and then push yourself to follow through. Make the extra money that you need. Run an ad on Craigslist or something and tell people to come to your house every Friday. And if you don't weigh 10 pounds less than the Friday before, than the week before, they can take any one thing that they want from your house. Your couch, your TV, your bed, whatever. Losing weight may be hard, but is it harder than giving away all your stuff? You see what we're doing? We're going through those 3 steps. We have a quantified result with the deadline, we add a greater pain, and then we put it in somebody else's hands. Give your Facebook password to a homeless shelter and tell them to close the account if you don't donate $10,000 to them in the next week or the next month. Turn off all the hot water in your house and only turn it back on if you make an extra 50 grand this month. What do you think your family's going to do? They're going to stay on you about it, right? Let them all know about what's going on. It's constant accountability. Give a nonprofit $5,000 or all your TVs, and then put momentum. Tell a nonprofit they can come to your house and pick up all your TVs or $5,000 in the next week. Put momentum behind your accountability so it's out of your hands. And then go make the money, lose the weight, take over Mexico, whatever. Forced accountability is a secret weapon that can make it all happen. Years ago, a guy was trying to make it in Hollywood, and no matter how broke he was, no matter how bad it got, he refused to get a job because he didn't want the comfort of a job. He didn't want to even have that as an option. He wanted to make sure there was no other option than getting his movie made. One night it got so bad that he stood in front of a liquor store and he sold his dog. And one of the problems he was having in Hollywood was that when he was born with forceps that they were used to pull him out of his mother, and so he had a facial deformity. And on top of that, he had a real thick accent, so nobody wanted to hire him. But eventually, his refusal to get a job and to make sure that he only had one option, that paid off. His movie got made. It's called Rocky. And eventually, Sylvester Stallone went back to that liquor store he found the guy to buy his dog back, but the guy liked the dog, so Stallone had to end up paying, it was like over $10,000 for the dog, and he had to give the guy that he sold the dog to a role in Rocky. He had to give him a role in the movie too. But that's forced accountability. Adjust your options so that success is the only option. The only way out is is through. Some of my favorite students, Jesse and Tina Stark, they both had jobs. They were like ships passing a night, almost never saw each other. So Jesse gave Tina the key to their apartment, so he had no way of getting into the apartment. So when he would get off work, he was forced to work, eat, and sleep in his car. And from there, from his car, he worked on his business from his car. He didn't go inside. He didn't sit on the couch. He didn't get on the bed or take a nap or get on the computer. None of that stuff. He built his entire business, everything from his car. And he wanted that pain. He wanted that pain. He invited it into his life. And by the way, that was in January. They started during a January. And by that June, they were doing over 150 grand a month. And they were doing all sorts of really cool stuff like building schools in Haiti and all sorts of awesome stuff. But that's not really the point. The point is that Jesse understood the power of accountability, forced accountability, inviting pain, policing pain. Now, what if you have kids like our good friend Lawrence, who was spending Christmas with his family? And I have some pretty cool Christmas stories, but this is one that sticks out. He was spending Christmas with his family, and when his father-in-law started making jokes about all the bad decisions that he made, he snapped. Larry got up, he stood up, he told his family that he was leaving the house and he would not come back and see his wife and kids until he had made $5,000. He left the house without a car, without a change of clothes, without even a cell phone. This was on Christmas Day. Again, I don't recommend doing this. So he walked to a nearby campsite. I talked to him for about 2.5 hours about this day. So when he left the house, he found a nearby campsite, which he didn't even know was there. But in there, he met a homeless family and he helped them find a rental that night. They put a little bit of money down. They didn't have much money, but the father, because he was real desperate, Larry, when he got on the phone, so he worked out a deal where the father could trade some repairs, because the father was kind of a handyman. He could trade the repairs in exchange for the rest of the rent and the security deposit. Now, Larry only made about $170 on that deal, but he stayed with that family. He didn't go back home. And together with that family, they put a deal together the next day. They made I think like $1,600, but he did more in the 24 hours after leaving the house with no plan of going back. He did more in those 24 hours with his business than he had done in over 10 years. And he said it was because he said in front of everyone, including his father-in-law who hated him, that he was not coming back until he did it. Eventually, a few days later, he went back with $5,000. Now, I'm not suggesting you leave your family like that. I know it's kind of nuts, but man, what a lesson, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy. How many people start a business on Christmas Day and make money by Christmas night? You know what I mean? That's pain. That's what happens when you police pain. Here's another crazy guy. A guy makes a bunch of movies as a kid, then he goes to Hollywood and he gets shut down. He gets rejected from film school. He gets kicked off a studio lot. He has no way to get in the movie business. Time to get real, right? Time to get realistic? Not for him. He snuck off a tour bus. He found an abandoned storage area and he basically lived and worked out of this closet in the back lots. And the people that saw him, like the security guards, they all saw him walking around and they saw him so often that everybody thought that he must have worked there. And that's how he got his shot. That's how he got his job. That's how he got started. Eventually, when he finally was allowed to make a movie, his first big deal went so horribly wrong that on at least 3 different occasions, the studio came down to fire him. And each time he would hide. And his thinking was that if they can't find me, they can't fire me. And that's how he held on to his job. They came to fire him, but they just didn't find him, so they didn't fire him. And he was doing this because he just wanted to finish the movie that he was making, because he knew in his heart, he knew that he would never get a chance to make a movie again. He was told that he would never work in that town again. And even with all this, he refused to settle. He refused to go back home or get a normal job or lower his ambitions. He did not do it. He refused to do it. Now, he may seem like a nice guy, all smiles and everything, but make no mistake, this guy was a nut. His name was Steven Spielberg, and the terrible movie that he was making was Jaws. And think about that for a second. If you knew somebody that was broke, that was living and working all day out of a closet, somebody who was hiding from his bosses because they wanted to fire him, somebody who was doing such a terrible job that he knew he would never work in movies again, he would never work in that industry or in that town again. And those are his words, by the way. He said that he knew that people hated him so much and hated his work so much that when he was done with this movie, when he finished Jaws, he finished it believing that he would never get a chance to make a movie again. So if you knew somebody that was in that situation, somebody who still, despite everything that I just said, still refused to give up or turn back or get realistic, whatever that means, what would you say to that person? What would, I guess not you, because you're much smarter than that, but what would society say to that person? What would a normal person say to that person? Grow up, get a job, live like a normal person, things like that, right? So imagine if Spielberg had listened to any of those voices. Imagine if he was reasonable. Imagine if he got realistic. You know, I once had a student who got a real tough diagnosis, and she didn't have years. She wasn't given years or even several months, but just a few months. They told her 2 or 3 months at the maximum. That's how much time she had to live. And it's funny because after that, after finding that out, she applied to become a student. She didn't tell me any of this or any of her health issues or anything that was going on. And when she was accepted, after becoming a student, she still didn't say anything. She just, she put her foot down and she got to work. She built a solid company. In the first month, she was doing over 10 grand. And in less than 45 days, she was doing over 35 grand a month. And that's when she told me the crazy news that she was going to die. And when I found out that she was expecting, to die any day now. I asked her why she chose to spend her remaining time as a student of mine. And she said something that I always remember. She said, Ozzy, my entire life I struggle with money, and in the remaining time that I have, the only thing that I can do to make sure that my daughter doesn't have the same problems that I had my whole life and had right up until now, the only way I can do that for my daughter is to make sure that her and I get trained and that we build something together so that I can leave her with a skill that'll be with her for the rest of her life. So even after I'm gone, she'll never have to worry about money again. Isn't that powerful? When she said that to me, I had to pause for a second. It was really touching, and it's just really, a really deep, it's like a real deep motivation. And it's weird because at first it seems crazy what she was doing, but then, after you hear her explain it, it suddenly makes sense, and it seems like the only logical thing to do. It seems crazy to not do it, right? And, unfortunately, she didn't, she did pass. It was about a year later, a little less than a year later, so she lasted a lot longer. She fought on a lot longer than expected. And to this day, her daughter knows how to make money, knows how to do it at will. She's doing over 40, 50 grand a month right now. So what she wanted to do, she did accomplish. And I mean, it's like, how beautiful a thing is that to do for your family? And she had instant accountability. She knew what was coming, and to look at that, that tidal wave of craziness that was coming, and to do what she did, it's really amazing. And it's weird because when it comes to like saying goodbye, I've always been a real puss in boots about that, man. It's just been, I don't know what it is. It's just always been something that's just, it's so sad, it's like, oh man. And she knew that about me, and she told me something. I'm just telling you, this is kind of a side thing. She told me something that I've since printed out, and I've kept it on my wall. I know exactly where it is right now. It's something that Winnie the Pooh said, and I've always remembered it. Here's the quote from Winnie the Pooh. Don't think about how saying goodbye is so hard. Think about how lucky you are to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. Oh, man. It's nuts. Towards the end, she said to me, Azam, I've lived more in the last year than in the last 54 years combined. And think about what she did for her family and her unborn grandkids. And then compare that to what you did last year for your family. The difference is accountability, pain. You get it? You get what I'm saying? I once had a couple, a husband and wife, they lived in Ohio and they always wanted to go to Florida. So just out of nowhere, they put in their 2 weeks notice. That was their accountability. They had 2 weeks to get started in real estate and make enough money to move out to Florida. And they did it. Well, kind of at least. 2 days before they left, before they were leaving their house, they got robbed and they lost the $4,700 that they had set aside for the move. So on one hand, it's kind of cool that they made almost $5,000 in 2 weeks, and they were able to do that starting from zero. But now it was all gone. Any normal couple would say, okay, let's not go right now. Let's wait another few weeks. Let's make it back, and then we'll go. Right? Not them. They left that night. They decided not to go later, but to leave sooner. Sooner. What the heck is wrong with them? And that's how they got it. They went out to Florida that night. The night they got robbed with no money, or at least almost no money. They thought, you know what, we'll go out there, we'll live out of our car for a few days, but we're not going to turn around. So they left their jobs, they left their house, and then, by the way, their house in Ohio got broken into again, and now the landlord was suing them for the repairs. So now they've got, credit issues and legal issues, and then they found out that she was pregnant. They found this out at a gas station. So imagine this couple at a gas station. They just had their house broken into twice. She's pregnant, they're homeless, they have no income, they're being sued. This monster just keeps growing, right? Any normal person, any normal couple, what would any normal person tell them? They'd tell them to go back home, stay with their parents, you made $5,000 in 2 weeks, go back home and do the same thing, and then you can, reorganize, regroup. That's the sensible thing to do, right? That's not what they did. They knew that if they did that, they would fall back in love with that comfort. They had to push forward. The only way out is through. They focused. Even though they ended up living in their cars for more than just a few days, eventually they fixed that. They put their business together. They put their thinking caps on. They got serious with their business. And in those first 6 months, they made over $300,000. About 40 to 50 grand a month, every month for the first 6 months. But here's the thing. For the whole first year, they only made about $350,000. You see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? In the first 6 months, they made about 40 to 50 grand a month. But then in the last 6 months, they made a total of about $50,000 in all of those last 6 months. You see the point? Imagine for the first 6 months of a year, you make 40 to 50 grand a month. And then for the last 6 months, you make $50,000 total in all the 6 months. You see what I'm saying? You see how the math works? Now, what was the difference? Accountability, pain. It's an interesting lesson that shows us both sides of the coin. And you may be thinking that if they were so broke, how did they afford afford to become students? Well, that's a funny story. Again, I don't recommend doing this, but they hid their financial situation from me until afterwards. You could say that they used some of their last money just to get trained. Now think about that. How advisable would that be? Most people would say that's crazy. I'm saying that's crazy. I'm even saying don't do it. But looking back, what would you say to them now? Was it worth it? Absolutely, right? It seems like it would have been crazy not to do it the way they did it. Also, something else you should know, in that, the Gattaca example I've been using for years, a lot of people have come back and they've told me how much they took away from it. I've really appreciated all that feedback, and I've appreciated that I was able to be touched in a certain way, by watching that and by seeing that, experiencing that scene. And I'm just grateful to be able to, pass that on to others. And that night, the night they were at the gas station wondering if they should go back, they both were really thinking about it. That was the time, we're pregnant. We just got robbed twice in a row. We have no money. We don't know what we're doing. Maybe we should, it's like a reasonable thing to just, to regroup and rethink this whole like going out and being homeless, living out of a car idea. But I've talked to them and they both said that every logical part in their brains, every logical part of their brain is saying, yes, do the sensible thing, go back, try again later. But then she looked at her husband, moments after finding out that she's pregnant, and she said, no, we're not going back. We're not saving anything for the swim back. Yes. That's what I'm talking about. I love this stuff. You gotta love it, right? Not saving anything for the swim back. It's beautiful. When I met Sonny Wells, he was living out of a car. And I don't need to tell you how nuts he was. 24 hours after I met him, he started, he put himself on the path to getting rich. Trisha Hancock, she had personal demons that we didn't talk about for years, but now we do because she's through them. She had a severe, addiction issue, alcohol and substance abuse, all sorts of crazy stuff. I've actually learned a great deal from her. She's one of the strongest people I know, and she got through it. And when she went to a dark place, her and Sam went to Thailand for 6 months. She wouldn't come back. She didn't enjoy it, but she wouldn't leave there until she resolved her problems. After my money and stuff was all seized and my loans were being called due, after the big raid on my house, I would leave my house not knowing how I was going to make money, but I knew that I wasn't going to come home until I did. And there were days that we slept in that bus. And honestly, I would have gotten a job or did anything normal that would have, or been normal, or done something normal if, I just don't have any credentials on paper. I have no degrees. I don't really have any, I don't have anything where I would get a job that would make me the 25 to 30 grand a month that I needed just to maintain the minimum payments that I needed to make at the time. The only way that was going to happen is if I went out and made that happen. And I had immediate accountability, because if I went home without making money or putting a deal together, if I went home without making something happen, then I wouldn't have a home to go back to. I had stuff that was repossessed and taken back. That money was just to make the minimum payments on stuff. And I love to brag, but it's always about other people, other students, other people on our team. And earlier today I gave you some examples, and I don't normally share them with the world or with everyone like this. I usually only go over it with with students that I'm working with, some of the examples I went over and some of the personal details that I went over. And even though they've given me permission to do that, I did withhold a few names, because even though they gave me permission, I don't normally go into such detail about their personal situations. At least I don't do it, for everyone. I do it for, close students. But the point really isn't about how profitable my methods are, or even how amazing the students are, or even the things they were able to do after they got trained. That's not really the point. The real point is the type of people that they were able to become when they properly used pain to their advantage. That's the lesson. Don't learn to avoid pain like most people do. Learn to police pain. Get crazy. When you're truly crazy, you live your life in a language that normal people don't understand. If people don't think you're crazy, then you're doing something wrong. The higher you reach, the crazier you look. I love this quote from Harun Yahya. I always wonder why birds stay in the same place when they can fly anywhere on the earth. Then I ask myself the same question. You guys gotta fly, fly, fly away, my little birds. And as you know, Harun didn't really say that. I said it first, and he stole it from me as usual. Here's what I want you to do. Constantly create situations where you have forced accountability. Always put your back against the wall so you are forced to reach higher than you think you can, to push further than you ever imagined. Any tangible or financial cost is a price that you will later be thankful for paying, because in return you will know and have demonstrated that you truly can do anything that you set your mind to. Most people are desperately unhappy, but not unhappy enough to do anything about it. You can leave those ranks forever. The reason almost everybody quits almost everything that they ever try is because quitting is usually the easiest thing to do. But with forced accountability, when you understand how to police pain, you can make quitting the harder thing to do, and advancing, the easier thing. Eliminate options so you only have one choice, and it's out of your hands, because when you only have one choice, it's also the easiest. And lastly, finally, remember this: don't blink. Hesitation is the abortion of potential. Fire first, aim second. Nearly all wasted potential, unrealized opportunities, and forgotten dreams are given birth at their core from hesitation. Associate pain with the acceptance of anything ordinary. Higher ambitions are the only antidote to excuses and procrastination. Don't fear what it will cost you to chase a dream. Fear what it will cost you if you don't. A story of failure beats a story of regret. It's better to do it wrong than later. And as always, if you don't want to lower the bar and you want to get trained on how to engage in business badassery on an unimaginable level, then find out when applications are being accepted. WeBuildEmpires.com. Okay, and you know what we've done here today is pretty different than any other episode or short film or video that I've done. This was different, and we went kind of in a different direction. And like what I was saying earlier, one of the things we want to cover today is why some of my students fail. Whenever I interview a student, if they're accepted, if I agree to work with them, then they are family. If you just look at how I talk about the students that I mentioned here, whenever I talk about anybody, any student, whether it's somebody that I'm working with or Millie or Sonny or anybody else on our team is working with, the way I'm talking about them, it's obvious. I'm talking about friends. It's like we're family. We are all a big family. This is my baby. It's a baby for all of us. And I've never agreed to work with anybody that was going to make it feel like work, or anybody that we didn't want to be part of our family, or anyone that I didn't think could make this happen. I always say the same thing to any student that I work with. If the interview goes well, as soon as they're accepted, I tell them that as long as they stay the same person that they are at that moment, then they will never have to worry about money again. They are going to build empires. They just have to stay in that mode and not get comfortable with settling below their potential. That's all it takes. Just stay the same person that you are right now. That's what I say. And to the students who don't make as much happen as they want to, and this is really important, I want you to listen to me carefully. To the students who don't make as much happen as they want, they will admit that this was their problem. They will say it themselves, that what we've talked about today was their problem, that they got too comfortable with where they are. What I'm saying is that you will never hear anybody ever tell you that I wasn't there for them. And look, I mean, I have critics. I have some people, I know it's hard to believe, but some people who are not in love with me, and I understand that. I get that, my personality or whatever, I get that. I understand that. But those people were never students or clients of mine. They never worked with me. And all the years that I've been doing this stuff, and man, I've been doing this for a while, since before you heard the name Monica Lewinsky. And in all that time, all those years, everyone I've ever worked with, you will never find a single client or a single student or anybody that I've ever worked with at all, ever, that will tell you that I did not do what I said I would do. You won't hear anybody ever say that I lied or misrepresented in any way anything that I ever talk about. You'll never hear anyone say that. And think about what I'm saying right now. It's quite a statement, quite a thing for me to say, isn't it? Especially, when you consider the internet and social media, it's really easy for anybody to badmouth me. It's easy to badmouth anybody, and people do it all the time. But no student, no client of mine, nobody that ever worked with me will ever tell you that I did not deliver. It has never, ever happened. It has never happened. Again, I'm saying this again. I'm not saying 90% of the time or 99%, 100% of the time. It has never happened. And I've been told again and again that I'm the only person that can factually claim that, and I have to say, I must humbly agree. And everything that I'm saying, you can watch and hear other students tell this to you for themselves. You go through any of our, we've got encyclopedias of testimonials, and you'll hear people say, you'll actually hear the people who didn't make things happen. I still have them, give testimonials, and you'll hear them say that the reason they didn't do, they didn't get where they wanted is because they got too comfortable with where they were. It's because of what we talked about today. And once they slayed that demon of normalcy, they went on to build empires. And again, just to be clear, no student, no client of mine, past, present, nobody will ever tell you that they worked with me and that I failed them or that I failed to deliver. They will all say that I was right there with them, taking them by the hand, helping them understand everything, helping them execute everything. I was right there every step of the way. And I know it's kind of weird to hear me, say this stuff, and to say it with such certainty. And I'm putting this out there on the internet. Anyone, there's a lot of accountability with what I'm saying. There's a lot of, innate accountability in everything that I'm saying. And I've been saying this for years. And the reason I could say it, I'll tell you, it's not, it's just the way I am. I'm just obsessive about everything. I'm obsessed with this stuff, and we've got this down to a science. If you're hungry and you've got what it takes, I can get anybody there. And I'm telling you this because when we talk about buying and selling companies, this stuff here, buying and selling companies with no money down, no credit checks, and eventually without leaving your house and making $10,000 to $30,000 a month on each deal that you do and all this other stuff, this stuff, it's real. Although my friends and I invented this stuff, we've taught it and we've synthesized it into a series of steps, and we have worked with thousands of people, tens of thousands of people from all around the world. And through that collaboration, through working with people, through helping them learn and learning from them, we've just gotten better and better and better. And this stuff, all this stuff that I'm talking about, it can be done. done. If you get trained correctly by the right person, you can do this. There's no doubt about that. You can do this. The only question is, will you do it? And in your heart right now, you know if you've got what it takes. You know the truth. And I'll tell you that if you're sure, if you're absolutely certain that you're ready to impress, if you are sure that living so far below your potential is so, painfully unacceptable that you won't quit the process of fixing it, and that at the first sign of pain, you won't just throw in the towel. If you're sure that your inner warrior is ready to set the world on fire, then you need to apply to become a builder. I'm serious. There's just no other way around it. You have to do it. It's just, you'd be insane not to. Right now, I'm actually personally training the students. I do everything. It's me. I do everything. I'm personally walking everyone through, each student through the process, through every step. And if you've got what it takes and you're sure of it, then you are the type of person that we're looking for. And the fact that you can do all this, all this beautiful stuff, that you can change your life and change the lives around you, you can show people worlds of opportunity that they have no way without you, they have no way of seeing, that you can take, a slice of humanity and help raise them to levels of income and potential and just life, just levels of life, a better level of life where you not only build an empire for yourself, but you become a social architect where you make new friends and you show them how they can build their own empires within yours. You can build empires with them together. You can help raise yourself and then others, be the rising tide that raises the ships around you, creating a generational impact. This is God's work. This is what we are made to do. This is what we are supposed to do. I guess I got to wrap this up. So let me say this. You are going to die. I'm going to die. Everyone's going to die, right? So you are going to die. We know that for sure. You are going to die. And when your time is up, even though it might be, as we said earlier, so hard to say goodbye, you can leave behind something for your people that they never have to say goodbye to. Why settle for anything less than that? WeBuildEmpires.com. This isn't for everybody. You know if it's for you or not. If it is, as soon as applications are being accepted, you need to be all over it. My goodness. Okay. I'll see you there. WeBuildEmpires.com. All right. I got to get going. I hope this helped you in even a fraction of a way. It's helped me and others. As always, I always love, hearing from you and seeing, how this does help you. So thank you so much for everything. Thanks for all the support. Thank you. We'll talk soon. God bless.